What's going on, y'all? Today we got would Michael Jordan have won 8 straight if he never retired? Let's get into it. My eyes still hurt from these lights. Barely open them.
It's one of the biggest what-ifs of NBA history, and one of the biggest arguments that Jordan's fans will make in favor of their hero. The narrative is that if Michael Jordan never retired at the end of the 1993 season to go play baseball, then his Bulls would have won the championship in 94 and 95, equaling 8 straight titles for the Bulls from 1991 to 1998. At first glance, it makes sense why many people would make that assumption. During Jordan's reign, he was clearly the league's best player and had no equal. Once Scottie Pippen was completely healthy and rose to all-star status, they began winning championships and almost never looked back. The thing is, there is a lot of variables in this scenario, and since we're talking about the legacies of several players involved, I think the topic deserves more in-depth analysis. Several YouTubers have covered this topic already, including an excellent video from Rusty Buckets, which I recommend checking out. I agree with almost everything he says. With that being said, this is my personal take, and I believe I have a unique perspective to offer on the matter, and I'm also curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. First off, players constantly talk about how hard it is to win 3 championships in a row. Other than the Chicago Bulls, only the Celtics of the 60s and the Lakers of the early 2000s have been able to do it. There are a number of other teams that we've described as dynasties but never achieved the feat. Although the Bulls three-peated twice, winning 8 in a row is something else entirely. With each trip through the playoffs and into the finals, there's more wear and tear on the team as a whole, and the team has less time to recoup and recover in the offseason. Players have spoken about this championship fatigue many times, but imagine the pressure and labor of having to defend your title 7 times straight. Not only that, but there's also the aspect of team motivation in comparison to team complacency. Sitting on the mountaintop over and over again can make you become relaxed and complacent. It's hard to envision the Bulls being as hungry as the 28 other teams in the league if they're winning for nearly a decade straight. But if there's a player and leader other than Bill Russell who could pull that off, my money would be on Michael Jordan. So it's tough to say how much a lack of motivation and championship fatigue could play a role, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Another aspect and narrative was that Michael Jordan was rusty for the Bulls' playoff run in 1995. Jordan retired in the summer of 1993. He missed the entirety of the 93-94 season, but he actually rejoined the Bulls with 17 games left in the 94-95 regular season. Although Jordan was still lethal, and although he had signature performances, like his 55 points just a few games into his return, overall, there was still some signs of rust. In the 17 games Jordan played in the 95 regular season, Jordan averaged 26.9 points on 41% shooting. Seems like nice numbers, but those are weak by Jordan's standards. Throughout his career up to the 95 comeback, Jordan had averaged nearly 6 more points and was more than 10% more efficient from the field. Even his free throw shooting was almost 5% worse than his career average. Some people will point out that his numbers did pick up from the regular season into the 95 playoffs, which is true as he averaged 31.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists on 48.4% shooting. But as impressive as these numbers look, believe it or not, these were also well below Jordan's normal averages in the playoffs. He was averaging a few less points, slightly less rebounds, fewer assists, and wasn't shooting as efficiently. Jordan was even averaging significantly more turnovers, which is typically a sign of sloppiness, and dare I say, even rustiness. Beyond even all the numbers was what people were witnessing with their own eyes. Throughout the 95 season, people in the basketball community were saying that Michael Jordan didn't look like the Michael Jordan we were used to. He wasn't putting up his usual numbers, he wasn't taking over games to the same extent as before, and more importantly, he wasn't making clutch plays when it mattered most, and was even making mistakes that cost his team. And due to this, and a couple other factors we'll get into, the Bulls lost in 6 games to a great Magic team in the 95 semifinals. Even Nick Anderson of the Orlando Magic said that the 45 Jordan wasn't as good as the 23 Jordan. All of this leads me to believe that Michael Jordan was in fact rusty. I mean, to even suggest that a player who rejoins his team with 17 games left in the season, having missed training camp, and chemistry building games with his new teammates, after playing a completely different sport for the last year and a half, could simply jump into the starting lineup and be the same player seems crazy to me. Now that doesn't mean that we need to pretend that this series never happened, or just ignore it when it comes to evaluating Jordan's legacy. This series still happened, but what it does mean is that in a hypothetical scenario where Jordan doesn't retire in 93, we would definitely be getting a sharper Jordan in 95. With that being said, there are still a couple other gigantic factors in whether or not the Bulls could have won 8 straight. If a Michael Jordan-led Bulls team made it to the NBA Finals in 1994 and 1995, standing in their way would have been an opponent they've never faced on that stage before, the Houston Rockets. The Rockets were incredibly strong at a position the Bulls were not, the center position. Hakeem Olajuwon is one of the greatest players of all time on both sides of the basketball. During Hakeem's championship runs in 94 and 95, he had historic performances where he torched the likes of Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, and David Robinson. If those legends couldn't contain Olajuwon, then a 36-year-old Bill Cartwright certainly wouldn't have either. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Bulls couldn't handle teams with dominant big men. The Bulls had also continuously eliminated Eastern Conference powerhouses led by Patrick Ewing, Shaquille O'Neal, and Alonzo Mourning. But a prime Hakeem is something else entirely. He definitely would have got his. Surrounding Hakeem were several other quality shooters and perimeter defenders. 1994 would have been a colossal finals matchup between two of the best teams from each conference. The Bulls would have been led by their core of Jordan, Pippen, and Horace Grant, while the Rockets would be led by Hakeem, Robert Horry, Otis Thorpe, and Vernon Maxwell. It's very possible that the Bulls make up the gap at the center position and still manage to win the series, but this would certainly have been their biggest challenge yet. Now the Bulls have hypothetically defeated the Rockets to win their 4th straight championship, but this now brings us to the biggest factor in the Bulls' quest to win 8 straight titles. Let's jump back into our reality where Jordan did retire to play baseball. Context is extremely important here. The Bulls were led by their dynamic duo of Jordan and Pippen for their championship runs in 91, 92, and 93, but often overlooked was their starting power forward and their 3rd best player during those championship runs, Horace Grant. Horace not only contributed significantly on offense during those years, averaging around 15 points a game, but he was also pivotal to the Bulls' success with his interior defense. Grant was around in Chicago for 1 year after Jordan's retirement, where his and Pippen's 93-94 Bulls made it to the Eastern Conference semifinals before they were eliminated in 7 games by Patrick Ewing's New York Knicks. After the season was over, Grant enters into free agency, and now Grant is looking around the Bulls organization, and unfortunately, he sees no Michael Jordan, but he sees Jerry Krause, a general manager who basically none of the players like. He sees Scottie Pippen, who's a questionable leader to say the least, who's frustrated with the organization and feuding with management and may get traded at any point. And all of this tells Grant that this organization is headed downhill, and the time to get out is now. As a result, Grant leaves Chicago in the summer of 94, which looks like a brilliant move at the time. He left a Chicago squad who wasn't winning any championships without Jordan, and he was joining the new rising power in the East, the Shaq and Penny Orlando Magic. If Jordan never retires and the Bulls are coming off their 4th straight championship heading into the summer of 94, well then there is almost certainly no way Horace Grant ever leaves the Bulls for the Magic in free agency. Remember, this is the same Magic team in 95 that now had Grant that went on to beat the Bulls in 6 games just shortly after Jordan's comeback. Grant switching sides was a huge factor in this series. If Grant is a member of the Bulls' Big Three instead of the Magic's, well then the Bulls may end up winning that series. If Grant never leaves the Bulls because Jordan never retires, then the Bulls don't have an opening or even a need at the power forward position. But in hindsight, this fact is actually devastating to the Bulls in the long run. The Bulls did have a need at the power forward position because of the void left by Grant, and that's why they traded for Dennis Rodman in the summer of 95. At the time, the Rodman trade was actually quite controversial for Chicago. Rodman was seen as a head case and a loose cannon. Maybe Phil Jackson could handle Rodman, but we didn't know that then. Some people even thought that Rodman could be the thing that destroys the Bulls organization from the inside, and there were decent reasons to speculate that. The 2 years before Rodman joined the Bulls, he had had plenty of off-the-court issues. He served suspensions, he had been violent on the court, he had been in a motorcycle accident, and so on. Calling him a potential distraction is putting it lightly. With Grant still in Chicago, there isn't a hole in the Bulls starting lineup, so they're never desperate enough to risk the Rodman trade in the first place. So now, without Rodman, Not only are we not sure if the Bulls win in 94 and 95 against the Rockets, but now we're not even sure if they're winning in 96, 97, and 98 against the Sonics and Jazz. Many people believe Rodman should have been the finals MVP in 96 instead of Jordan. That's how impactful and crucial he was to their success. So with all of this considered,
That's the first time I
ultimately,
heard
my
that.
conclusion is the Bulls would have likely not won 8 straight championships if Jordan never retired to play baseball, even if it means they win in 94 and 95. Now, is this statement a fact? Of course not. It's simply my opinion based on the information we have. Honestly though, I think it's funny how the biggest Jordan fans have to argue so strongly for the 8 straight narrative, as if 2 three-peats in 8 years isn't enough to prove that Jordan is the GOAT. Like I said, all of this is just my opinion, but I want to hear yours. Let me know in the comments section how many titles you think the Bulls would have won if Jordan never retired in 93.
Facts, y'all. Let me know in the comments and let me know why you think that. You know, give me a little explanation with it, y'all. Don't just say I think he'll have 8 or 7 or something. Give me an explanation with it, y'all. Me personally, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. There's too many variables, too much context. That if Jordan stays, everything just gonna be different. You know, it's like changing time. It's hard to do, man. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. Make sure you click on the last reaction, though, y'all. I'm tired. Just woke up. Can barely open my eyes right now. I'm out of here, though.